In this video, I'll guide you to a complete step-by-step guide on how to create a day-to-night transition. It's already been used a lot in movies where they film something in daylight and then transform it into nighttime. I did something different and created a cool transition from this effect. At the end of the video, I will also break down how I did the final transition in DaVinci Resolve 20. So stick around for all sorts of handy tips in DaVinci Resolve and Fusion. I'm currently working on a beginner and advanced Fusion and DaVinci Resolve crash course. So stay tuned for that if you want to dive deep in Fusion and DaVinci Resolve. Here is the full Fusion composition we made. It can be really intimidating when you're not used to Fusion, but I promise you it will make sense when I break everything down. To add this clip in Fusion, simply select your footage, left mouse button, and then Alt-click and drag it on top of your footage here. To get it over to Fusion, we will right-click and then New Fusion Clip, or we can just simply select the clip and hit the Fusion icon here. Fusion is a node-based workflow, which is a lot different than using a layer-based system such as After Effects. You actually do have a timeline in Fusion. It's just right up here above. We have keyframes and then we can see our footage here. But this timeline is only used to set your timing of the clips and also change keyframes and whatever parameters you need to do in a timeline system. Then we also have Spline. Here we can adjust our keyframes where needed. So if you're like me, coming from After Effects, here are the things we will use that are similar to After Effects. The only difference here is we will use nodes to apply all our techniques and layers. But it's not a layer system, it's a node-based system. So if you never used Fusion before, I will explain briefly how nodes work and how to use them. The way nodes work in Fusion is with inputs and outputs. So for example, this square here is our output of our footage. And in between these things, we can add nodes. Like for example, when we hit Ctrl spacebar, we can add a node. You can see we have all sorts of nodes we can use. You can go ahead and see for yourself all the different nodes and what they are doing. But most of the nodes we will use are actually on the top here. But it's really handy to know the most common nodes in Fusion, remember them so you can type them really fast here and add it to your Fusion page. One of the most common nodes we will always use is a merge node. This is just used for stacking different layers on top of each other and also blending them. To add a merge node, we can go on the top here and we have a shortcut for the merge. For example, we want to add a solid on top of this footage. We can add a background on the top here and then place it in your foreground, so the green color. Then this will be placed on top and we don't see our footage anymore. Let's say you want to change the order, we can place the background behind our footage, sort of like a layer system, where we place our background before it or behind it. To do this in Fusion, we have a shortcut, Ctrl-T on the keyboard, and then we can change the order which these colors will be perceived. So we have our footage on the background, which is the orange color, and then our solid on the green color. We will rename this solid so it's not confusing. To rename this, we select it and then hit F2 on the keyboard. We will name it solid. So to change the order of these two colors, we will hit Ctrl-T on the keyboard and then we rearrange things. So now we will not see our solid anymore because it's behind this footage. And we can also use the blend mode to blend between this node and this node. So set it to screen or any other apply mode you want. We also have a blue color here. This is the alpha, so the alpha channel. We can use this for adding masks or any elements that you want to use the alpha channel. For example, our footage here, let's say we want to mask out only the street here, rectangle, click on it, and then it will use the blue color, the alpha channel, to create a mask of our footage. You might be thinking, why is it so much work to do some simple things like this? When you know how the system works, you can work really fast. Now we added a merge node, then a background node, all within the presets here. But there's a much faster way to do this. Let's select this. When we click on it and hit Shift on the keyboard, we can disconnect it and place it somewhere else or just delete it. So we needed a merge node and a background node. So we select our footage here, then Control Spacebar, background, enter, and there we go. When we do it this way, it already made a merge node for us and a background node. Now let's select our background and add a mask to it. And I will just demonstrate how to solo out different layers. Go to your preview, and on the top, we have a split screen here in the viewer. Select this, and now we have two viewers. And when we go to our media, you can see we have 3 dots here. These dots represent which preview you will see. When I click the left dot, it will show in the left viewer. So it will only preview this node. You can also just drag it over here and then it will preview it. For example, when we only want to see the mask, we will drag this over here and we can see the mask, or just use the dots here. This way we can just work on a different mask and see the final output here. When you go to the inspector, we have all different properties we can use for the selected node. For example, this mask we created here, we can just change it here in the viewport, or just change the properties within the inspector. Okay, first things first, let's now convert our log 3 footage to Rec 709. To do this, let's Control Spacebar and then search for a node called Color Space Transform. Then add it to your pipeline, and now let's set up our color space. First off, we need to change the input color space into Canon Cinema Gamut, and then input gamma log 3. There we go, and the output gamma should be gamma 2.4. There we go, and now we converted our log 3 footage in Rec 709. Because our camera is moving and we want to place things in the background, it has to move along with it. To do this, we need to 3D track our camera first. So to add a 3D camera, we need to first 3D track the footage. When you type in camera tracker, this is the one we will use. Let's make sure we have our camera tracker in our viewport and then preview the auto tracks. In the track tab here, when we lower the detection threshold, we can add more tracks. The more tracks you have, the more data you have. So it's important to lower this value a bit so we have more tracking data. But there will be a problem because this person here is moving and it will try to track onto the moving person. And that's something we don't want for our 3D track. To avoid this, we can simply place a rectangle mask here, invert it, and then when we preview the auto tracks, you can see it's avoiding this area where the mask is. Set a keyframe for the center, and then we scrub through the timeline and adjust where needed. And also a keyframe for the width and height. And we can create a garbage mask for this, so it's avoiding those areas. Alright, this is all looking good. Now we can hit auto track. This will probably take up a few minutes depending how much of a resolution your footage is and the many frames it needs to track. In the camera settings, we can change our focal length. I know this footage was shot on a full frame sensor with 16mm lens. We will apply this. If you don't know it, don't worry. Fusion will kind of guess what the camera lens will be. Now we can go over to the Solve tab. You can use the track filtering To select or isolate some tracks that are not good, you can detect bad tracks beforehand before you start solving. You can change the minimum track length to adjust how long the track should last for all these points. I recommend setting these to a middle value just because we want enough tracking data and not deleting all the tracks. And then we can hit solve. Okay, now the tracker is done calculating, and we can see here on the right corner we have an average solve error of 1.7, which is not bad, but we can improve upon this. When you go to operations on selected tracks, you can show all the solve errors. When it's at none, you see nothing. So when you hit all, you see all the values. So for example, here we have a red track at the value of 3, which is not a good track. So let's delete this and also delete all the other tracks that are considered bad tracks. Okay, now once we've done that, we will go to the solve and then hit solve again. Okay, after playing around a bit with the settings, I got the average solve error down to 1.5, which is pretty good in our situation. Let's say you're still struggling to get a decent track, then you can use an unsharp mask effect and a noise reduction on your footage, and this will help a bit to get a good clean track of your scene. It's a bit trial and error, you just have to play around with the settings and see what works best, but always check your solve error. This is a good way to see how good your track really is. Now we will go to the export tab and hit export. Now Fusion created a node tree for us, which is a 3D comp, a 3D scene. We can select this and go to our preview. To navigate in the 3D viewer, hit Ctrl on your keyboard and use the scroll wheel, then we can zoom out. When you hit Shift on the keyboard and right click, we can move around in the scene. When you hit Shift on the keyboard and use your scroll wheel, you can go up and down like this. But I rarely use this method. Just Control and then Shift, right click. A quick tip for your nodes and organization, just right click and then Arrange Tools to connect it. This ensures it snaps into place. So for now, let's hide the point cloud and the ground plane. To hide things in your node tree here, we can hit Ctrl P on the keyboard and then it will hide those two nodes. Right now this camera is connected to the footage. This way when we go in our 3D scene, we have a footage in the background, but we don't really need this for now. So let's double click this and then it hides it. There's a good way to organize nodes in your workflow, because when you have a lot of node trees like this, it can get cluttered and you don't see the light of day. You see all those different nodes and you don't know what they are doing. The way to fix this is to select all of your nodes and we can either group them. So we can select them, right click and then group. I like to use a node called underlay, and when you add it, now we have a section that is highlighted, and when we click the underlay node, we can move the whole node tree. You can rename this as well, so Alt click on this underlay node and then F2 on the keyboard. Now we can rename this camera. There we go, and we can also set our color. I will use the violet. There we go. Okay, now we actually don't need this camera tracker anymore, so let's just hit Shift and place it on the side here. We will not plug it into anything. We will just leave it here. If we need to retrack anything, we can do so when we have our camera tracker here. Okay, now in our render node, we can take the output and place the output on our color space transform here. When we do so, we have automatically a merge node. Let's place this over here, and just for organization purposes, let's alt click to have a pipe router and then place it here. It's always good to organize all your stuff beforehand, otherwise all your nodes will be cluttered throughout the whole worksheet, and that's something we want to avoid. So now we have all our nodes organized. Let's move on to isolating this sky here. So we need to essentially do a sky replacement. To do so, let's first take our footage here and Command or Control C on the keyboard and Control V to copy and paste footage. And with this footage, we will now use a Luma mat. We will use the Luma mat to isolate or key out this area, so the sky. Let's select our color space and then Luma keyer and preview our Luma keyer. In our Luma keyer, we have in the inspector all the parameters we can use to isolate this background. Let's first invert it and select our alpha channel here in the viewport. Okay, and now when we clip the low value here and the high value, you can see what this is doing. You can also contract or expand the edges like this and blur it out. But be careful with this blur setting here, because sometimes it can look a bit too blurred. Now go out of the alpha and let's invert this. For now, let's leave this as it is, and now we will work on the 3D background, so the background image. Now to import the assets here in Fusion, you can simply go to the media pool and select the Eiffel Tower cutout and along with the night sky and just place it here. We don't need to merge. Let's delete this. This is the Eiffel Tower and this will be our night sky. We will place our two images on 3D cards. This way we can place it wherever we want in 3D space. Let's uncheck the media pool first and select the night sky, Control spacebar and then type in plane, image plane 3D. Let's add this. Make sure it's on the foreground, so the green color, and then the output will go into our merge 3D. When we zoom in, we see our image plane here, but it's so small you can't even see it. Go to the image plane, go to transform, and then set the scale to a much higher value. Let's say 15. But right now it's in the foreground. We need to make sure it's all the way in the back. To do this, let's select our image plane again. And here in the translation, we can adjust our Z position. Let's put it at a crazy number. Let's say -1000. This way it's all the way in the background and we can scale it up to say 100, 1000, even more, 2000. And now this ensures it's all the way in the background. With these handles you can move it up and down on the X-axis, the Y-axis and the Z-axis. So let's move it up. And you want to make sure now it goes all the way through in the camera animation. This we don't want because otherwise our sky will be clipping. Let's move this up a bit. You can go to rotation and rotate it a bit towards the camera like this. Now don't worry about the bottom side here because we have our foreground element in there. We just want to make sure the top of the image is not clipping and is always in frame. You can also add a color correct node on the image and turn down the saturation a bit and more towards green bluish. And now we need to get our Eiffel Tower in place as well. But before we do this, let's select our output of our Luma keyer and place it in the alpha of our render node. Now we can see our dancer and also the trees and everything are isolated. Let's use this. There we go. And when we go to this merge node and preview it, we see what it's doing. It's cutting out the background and placing the trees and everything in the foreground on top. But obviously it's not perfect. We still need to fine-tune things to make it look much better than it is right now. Don't worry about the foreground here. The matte is not perfect, but we will clean up everything later. Alright, now it's time to add our nighttime Eiffel Tower. Same thing here, we add our plane. So image plane 3D, add it, and then plug it into the merge 3D. Let's set a split screen and make sure the merge 3D is viewed in this viewport. Now let's go to the image plane again and transform it. Scale it way up, something like 20. And then when we look at our point cloud, we want to add it somewhere at the same depth where the real Eiffel Tower is. It's gonna be way in the background as well. So we need to scale this up quite a bit. 500. Now I'm just gonna roughly line everything up just like it is in real life here. I'm just gonna eyeball this for now. Somewhere around here should be fine. Let's drag it over here and then up. Scale it down. Obviously it's not gonna be exactly the same as it is here because it's not perfectly at the same angle, but the closer you get to it, the better the transition is gonna be. Okay, now preview your footage to see that it sits perfectly in the right spot. And this is looking good for us. Okay, now let's change the Luma matte once more so we don't see the Eiffel Tower. Go to your luminance and then the low value. Let's put it down. And contract and expand the edges a little bit more so we still have some elements of the real Eiffel Tower blended in with the nighttime Eiffel Tower. But now we need to fix all the foreground elements here. To do this, let's get our footage once more, copy and paste it, and then place it over here, and it will make a new merge node. Now before we add our masks and everything, let's first create a planar track from this footage, only to track the floor. So type in planar tracker. Okay, now with our planar tracker selected, we can leave all the settings as it is. Only the tracker we will use the hybrid point area, just because it's a better accurate way of tracking our plane. So select this and keep in mind we have to select a frame for our reference time. That's just the way the planar tracker works. When we go in the middle of the footage, somewhere around here, frame 210, we will set this as our reference time. Now let's create our mask in this area. I think this will work fine with enough tracking data. Okay, then when you selected your area, you can set your reference time here, set it. You can always check it here, it's at frame 210 now. And now let's go to tracking and track to the end. It doesn't have to be so perfect because this will only be used for our masks. Okay, now it's done calculating. Let's go back to frame 210 and track it backwards. Double check your planar track if everything is looking fine and it's not glitching too much. Then when you're happy, create a planar transform. This will create a new node for us with all the tracking data with keyframes. Let's get rid of this planar track here and place this at the bottom. In your merge node, let's create a mask. So select your merge polygon and let's create our mask now. So make a mask like this. There we go. Place it at the bottom. And it's very important to go to frame 210 and then drag this planar transform in between these two nodes. There we go. And now we don't see anything, but when we scrub through our footage, you will notice that it is tracking and following along our 3D camera. We can adjust our mask where needed and also change the soft edge quite a bit, so we have a good transition between the light and the darkness. Keep in mind we will also color correct this, so it will look much better than in this example. And when everything is looking correctly, we can actually get rid of this planar track because we don't need it anymore. Let's first organize some things so we have a better overview. Luma, matte. And then here we will add another underlay node for the masks. So let's call this masks. Now we have a much easier way of reading our node tree. We know where everything is right now. We have our camera, our 3D scene, then our Luma matte, and then here we will get our masks. When we look closer to our footage, you can see the dancer is almost fully transparent, especially in the upper body here. That's because we need to add another mask called a magic mask. This will only isolate the dancer. It's a bit tricky to use all these masks, but this way it's all looking much better and it really looks like it's nighttime. It's a lot of work for one shot, but once you use all these masks, you have full control over the whole look of your image. So to isolate the dancer, let's drag this footage over here again and add another merge node. Then here we will add the magic mask. In the magic mask node, let's set the mode to better because then it's gotta be better, of course. And the way magic mask works is we select an area and then the tool will magically just create a rotoscope for us and see the movement of the dancer. So in the stroke mode, make sure you select your plus tool and then just isolate and paint over our breakdancer here. Okay, like this. This should give us a clean mask. Now let's solo this. And now we need to refine our mask. Go to the matte options. Go to alpha. And then here we can refine our mask. On the lowest point of the threshold, drag it close to the middle, and the high point, drag it to the middle as well. Use the restore fringe to restore those details, especially with the motion blur, but don't overdo it, just a little bit. And I will not use the erode dilate. And adjust the gamma. When you hit Alt on the keyboard, you can have the minus tool and select areas that you don't want to be masked out. And then go to tracking and the same as before, track forward and then later we will go track backwards. Right off the bat, you can see it's doing a great job seeing what the dancer is doing. It's following the movement perfectly and I don't have to adjust anything. Alrighty, now our magic mask is done calculating, and it's pretty sick actually how fast this thing works and how accurate it is. You can still change the edge a bit so you don't see the bright sky coming through. So let's change the erode and dilate just a tiny bit. Then the threshold as well. One thing I recommend is right-clicking on your magic mask, and once you are happy with the final result, you can cache to disk. This ensures everything is stored in a cache. So, for example, when you leave your program and start it up again, the magic mask can do freaky things and it will not look exactly the same like it was before. So to avoid things like that, we need to cache and pre-render our magic mask. Now it's time for the details. We will adjust our colors a bit so it looks like a nighttime city scene, and then also tweak some small imperfections so it looks more refined and better. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is color correct this foreground layer here. So when we go to our footage again, we can add a color corrector. So type in color corrector, and now you can see what this is gonna do. This is gonna adjust all our foreground elements. We want to make it a little bit more blue, and then adjust the saturation and also the gain. We can turn it down a bit, and the brightness. And then the same for our magic mask. Let's add a color corrector, desaturate it, and adjust the gain. If you're still not happy with the edge here on our mask, we can go to our luma keyer, and sometimes it's because the backside is still lighting up a bit. So we need to change our luma key, and then you can see it's gonna expand or extract the edges. You can also add a background. So we make it a little bit more darker as well. You can see the difference. This is without the background and this is with a black background. And I'm also gonna adjust the stars because I think it's way too bright and it doesn't look so realistic. So we go to our image plane of the night sky, and then the opacity, we can turn this down like this. And depending how hazy the atmosphere is, you should also see some glow in the night sky, especially here with the Eiffel Tower. So we can add this behind or in front of our camera tracker. So we can add a glow, and then you can right away see what it's doing. Let's adjust our glow here. We don't want to overdo this effect. Just a tiny bit like this. Yes, perfect. And really make sure your magic mask is clean. You don't want a black or a white edge. Just keep it right like it should be, like this. These street lights here in the background, in the nighttime scene, it will obviously light up. So we're gonna add some flares here where the street lights are. And then we can also highlight our street here. For these flares in the background, let's copy and paste our 3D scene. And we're gonna place this right between our mask and our magic mask. Let's make a new underlay node. and call this street lights. And we're gonna change the color to something like brown. Now we can get rid of these elements here. And now let's go to Media Pool and add our PNG. Add the image plane again and then plug it into the Merge 3D. This scene is a bit tricky because we can't really tell where everything is in 3D space. So in this case, I'm just gonna guess where the position of the poles, the street lights are. To get rid of the black background, we will go to the alpha and tone it down so we only see our flare. And now we're gonna preview this. And this sits perfectly in the 3D scene. Now let's do the same for our other street light here. So copy and paste this. And place it in the background right around there. Okay, you can also scale it up. I recommend rotating this element so it doesn't look exactly the same as the other one. Right, I'm pretty happy with this. And now we can add a glow effect to street lights as well. Glow. And I will also add a color corrector again and adjust the saturation first and also the glow. And now we're gonna create another mask for the highlights. So copy and paste your footage once again, create a merge node, and we will use the planar transform again. And now let's create our mask right here and another one right here. Now stack these two masks on top of each other and then add our planar tracker by holding Shift. And then it should follow along nicely with our footage. But we need to change our masks and feather it out a bit. So the soft edge, like this. Same for the other one. And now let's add a color corrector. And let's solo this. And we want to add a lot of contrast so we only perceive our highlights. Color correct it to the blue side. And now let's preview this. That's too much blue. You can already see a massive difference. It's a lot more believable now. And when we go to our merge node, we can see the before and after. I hit Ctrl P on the keyboard and then you can see the difference. Now the only thing left to do is to go back to DaVinci Resolve, do our final color grading and our final editing. The good thing about working with these nodes is that you have full control over everything now. You can change anything you want in the node trees here. It's sort of like a map laid out in front of you and you can change anything you want. It's the same in After Effects, but here we have a more clear picture of what we're working with. And especially with compositing techniques like this, I recommend using Fusion actually. One thing I forgot to mention is our motion blur. So all these lights here should have motion blur when the camera is moving. So to do this, let's go to our render in the Merge 3D. And then in the settings, we can enable motion blur. We can adjust the settings here. I found that around 4 quality is a decent looking motion blur. We can also change the shutter angle, but this footage was shot in shutter angle 180, so I'm gonna leave it at that. And now let's do the same for the street lights, and yeah, that's it. Now for the final transition, I'm currently in DaVinci Resolve Studio 20. It's in public beta right now, so you can try it out and see for yourself. But there are some really handy features, especially when you want to create reels. Let's break down how I did this final transition. So this final effect was shot in 50 frames per second, so we can slow it down later on. So for the final transition, I made this in a compound clip. So first thing I did is rendered out the final Fusion comp we made and then overlaid it on top of our original. Since this is 50 frames per second, I interpret the footage in 25, so that way it's half speed and it's slowing down. Same for the Fusion clip. And then these adjustment clips right here are the color gradings. So you have a color grading for the daylight and then a color grading for the nighttime. And then transition between those as well. For the transition itself, I just made a simple fade and then in the final comp, an overlay as well. And then with some additional ambience and sound effects, we have our final edit. If you look closely, there's also a speed ramp going on here. So right as the transition is happening, I slow it down just a tiny bit. And in DaVinci Resolve 20, it's a bit different than the previous version because now we have a separate dedicated keyframes button. So here we see all our keyframes and our speed change. And with the curves right here, we smoothed out our speed ramp so it looks really nice. Let's say you want to use this for a reel. You could go to timelines and create a new timeline. Then go to format and use the 1920 by 1080. Then use the vertical resolution. Then copy and paste our day to night transition. And the good thing about DaVinci Resolve 20 is that we now have a vertical option for viewing our reel. This is much more efficient when working on reels. You could also go to Ctrl F on the keyboard and then have a full preview. But when you're editing, this is just so much better guys. And that was basically all there is to it. It was pretty fun to create this effect and I hope you guys learned something from this. And yeah, see you guys on the next video. Peace.